I'm going to take you along on my unedited 9th training walk with Louie. Honestly, this day was a little bit of a struggle. By this point in our training, Louie's leash skills were quite good and he needed very little prompting on our regular path, so I decided to increase the difficulty by taking him on a more popular route. I'm going to show you how I managed Louie's increased pulling due to the extra stimulation. We also saw another dog, so I'm going to show you how I worked on his leash reactivity without pushing him over threshold like I did on day 4. Louie had no leash skills when we met. He was reactive to dogs from blocks away, and he was also reactive to most men and to small animals, including birds. In this mini-series, I'm going to show you our sessions where we work on all of that with force-free methods. This is still my second week with Louie, so I'm continuing to reward almost all voluntary check-ins.
Can you fix your leash? Yes. Good. Yes. Good boy. Louie. Yes.
If you watched my video last week where I showed my 8th walk with Louie, you'll know that Louie found this dead bird. I've been using it to practice heavily distracted name recognition at the beginning of walks. Again, I use the up and down game at the start of walks to help Louie relax and also focus on me.
Yes. Good. Yes. Okay, let's go. Yes. Good.
I also want to remind you from earlier walks that when a dog is just learning leash skills, I'm not picky about rewarding improper position or any of that. I want all leash tension removed from walks, and then I start working on the finesse. However, one drawback of doing so is that Louie cuts in front of me because he has been rewarded in front of me in the past. If you start offering rewards at your side only, behaviors like this will improve.
So because he was a little bit too focused on me there, I'm actually going to switch to the easier treats.
It was so abnormal to find something on the sidewalk that Louie does ignore his name and pull here. I stand firm to prevent that from working, and then I reward him when he returns to me without calling him a second time. Here I'm calling him back at the slightest bit of leash tension, but you'll see next that he's also learning to relieve that leash tension on his own without being told.
Can you fix your leash? Fix. Yes. Oh, all the way. Yeah, good boy. Yes. Louie. Yes. Okay. Good. I didn't even see it.
I'll save you from having to watch the clips where I pick up his poop, but just a reminder that in high-use areas like this, with lots of potential triggers, I throw a handful of treats into the grass to distract Louie while I'm busy.
Okay. Let's get moving. Good boy. Okay. Louie. Yes. Getting better with pulls. Did the treat fall out of your mouth again, Louie? Good boy. boy. Yes. Can we go this way? Lulu. Yes. Good. Let's go to the garbage.
I've been asked on previous videos why Louie's wearing a collar rather than a harness.
Good boy.
I do prefer to use a harness to protect the neck, but I also respect client preference. We changed Louie's gear in phases to improve his freedom while still keeping his guardian comfortable. At first, we increased the leash length from 3 to 6 feet to help with pulling, and then in week 3, we switched to a harness and an 8-foot leash.
Yes. So here, because he seemed kind of nervous, I'm just going to practice getting him back a little bit more calm. Great. Louie. Yes. Yeah, I know there was a guy. I know. Yes. Yes. Lulu, want to fix your leash? Okay, it's all jumbled up this time. Yes, thank you for the paw. I know you. That is the right side here. Can I have it? You're sitting on it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, good.
Another nice thing about switching to a harness rather than this loose collar is that his leash gets tangled way less frequently.
Hey, Louie. Good boy. Yes. Well, that's kind of rude, sir.
We're walking past a school, so Louie's usually pretty interested in these picnic tables, and he stops for a long sniff each day. However, I was not expecting him to pee. If this was a frequent occurrence, I would keep a farther distance when we walked past.
Yes, good. Wonder if we're gonna see dogs today.
We'd had lots of opportunities in these 2 weeks to practice Louie's reactivity to small animals and men, but we hadn't gotten another chance to get close to another dog since our walk on day 4. I'd changed our walk times around, hoping to see dogs so he could progress his reactivity training.
Yes.
I waited to see if he would relieve the leash tension on his own, which he did.
Good. So once you get to know your neighborhood, you can also pick treats based on it. So there's a spot just up here where Louie really struggles to not pull me. So, Louie, you're gonna have these treats, and then we're gonna switch back to the better ones. Good job. Okay, let's go. Yes, good check-in. Louie. Yes. This is the spot. Yes, good boy.
Just a reminder that dogs' noses and sense of smell are incredibly powerful. To us, this may look like a low distraction setting, but Louie's nose tells him that lots of dogs have been here, and that dramatically changes the difficulty.
Lou. Yes. Okay, let's go check it out.
Also a reminder that if your dog pulls to a smell, it's important to stand firm so that that behavior doesn't get reinforced. I reward for returning to me, and then I always try to bring the dog back to the smell with a loose leash. I've had a few people ask what I consider to be pulling. For me, I define it as when there's enough tension on the leash that I feel the need to grip it quite tightly.
Louie! Yes! Yes, good check-in. Which way? Good. Okay. Okay, can you wait a sec? I want to take a look.
This trail splits into 3 directions, so I scattered treats to distract Louie as I took a better look at our surroundings. I decided to go a new route today because I assumed that more dogs walked this way.
Hello.
I was curious how Louie would do for
Yes.
pulling in this new environment.
So, Louie. Good. Okay.
I didn't like here how quickly he would unfocus on me after getting his treats because it showed me how much he was struggling in this new environment. I used the up and down game to help get his focus back.
Keep walking.
You'll often hear suggestions for taking your dog on a quiet trail when they're just learning leash skills, which is a good idea. However, I just want to remind you again that depending on how many other dogs use that trail, the environment can still be really stimulating and quite difficult.
Yes. Louie. Good boy. Okay. Okay. Yes. Woo. Yes.
Louie rarely pulled on leash in familiar settings
sniff.
by this point in our training, but you can see how hard he's struggling on this walk.
Okay, you want it? You can sniff. Don't care anymore? Okay.
I also made the decision on this walk that Louie needed to be upgraded to an 8-foot leash so that he could reach most of these trees without any leash tension. Sometimes the easiest solution is just changing the gear.
Good.
I knew that there was a very interesting smell here because Louie never blows off a treat.
Very good spot, sir. Come on back to the... I want to go back to the trail. Lots of mozzies. Okay.
I would have walked on the grass with him, but the mosquitoes were so bad that week that I preferred staying on the pavement. There I pre-called him before he pulled, and then I went with him since he was so interested.
Good. Okay. I'm gonna stay on the pavement, bud, because there's so many mosquitoes. Yes, good boy. Yes, good.
There was barely any tension here, but he released it on his own.
Woo. Yeah. Good.
I encourage you to let your dog sniff on walks because it's enjoyable and relaxing for them, but I do understand if sometimes you just want to walk without stopping every couple feet. If that's the case, I suggest teaching 2 cued versions of walking, loose leash and heel. I didn't teach Louie to heel since his reactivity is my focus, but it is a skill that I encourage.
Yes. Okay,
I'll link a video here and in the caption for how I train both versions of walking on cue.
What'd you find? That is some intense sniffing. Good job. Yes. Come on, we don't need to go to the worm. Good boy. Doop. Louie. Yeah, good. You're doing so good. Good. Yes. Good boy. Good boy.
I'm using the up and down game to use up some of the lower value treats in my hand and to really capture Louie's focus
Yes.
before we approach the blind corner.
Yes. Lulu. Yes. Good. Okay. I am not going in there, bud. Louie, good boy. So because we are approaching a corner and I have no idea what's around it, I'm going to switch again to the good stuff just in case there's a dog. Yes. Lou. Yes. 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 Louie. Good boy. Lulu. Okay, let's walk. What? Lou. Good. This side. Cool. Hey, we're gonna see a dog. Lulu. Louie? Yes. Good. Louie? Yes. Good. Louie? Yes. Okay, let's go over. Lou? Yes. Come here. Hey, Louie. Good boy. Okay, come on. Let's go farther.
Louie was completely lost to me there, so I'm increasing the distance from that particular area and then rewarding every check-in for a
Yes.
little while afterwards.
Can you fix your leash? Fix. Yes. Good. Yes. Good. Yes. Okay, Lulu, I gotta get more.
Louie is very good at knowing which leg to lift when I say fix, but he's never quite figured it out based on tactile cue only.
Will you fix? Yes. Good. Yeah, that was quite the grunt. Good job. Should we go in? I don't know which way we should go. Yes. Ooh, dropped it. Lulu. Is your leaf jangle? Louie, can I see your leash? Oh, we're good. Okay. Wasn't sure. Oop. Oh, good. There's a dog, Louie. Let's go practice with the dog. Good boy. Yes. Okay, Lou, switch to the good stuff.
Here I'm switching to the high value rewards and giving him one before we get closer to the dog so that he knows what I have.
Excellent. Good boy. Let's go. Yes.
2 things are being rewarded here. Walking towards the dog without leash tension, or being able to look at the dog without reacting.
Yes. Yes. Good. Let's get closer.
I was worried here that the woman and her dog had disappeared down another path and that we'd missed our chance.
Okay. Louie? Yes. Good. Get that one. Okay, and then we gotta fix your leash, bud. Okay, you set? Good.
If I'm planning on working on reactivity, I make sure that the leash isn't under his legs as a tripping hazard.
Go find him. Okay, Lulu. Yes. Louie.
I was happy to see that the lady and her dog weren't gone.
Louie, come. They're coming our way. Come on. Good boy.
But I also didn't want to get super close to them this early into his reactivity training.
Boy. Let's see what happens, okay?
As I will discuss in an upcoming video, distance is one of the easiest ways to manage threshold. Since they were walking our way, I lured Louie off the path for a little extra space to let them walk by.
Yes. Good boy.
However, they decided to leave instead, so our session was short-lived.
Yes. Good.
As I walked Louie over that way to watch them walk away, he got quite fixated. You can see here that I had to call him back twice to get his attention, and he still seems a bit frantic and distracted, so I decided not to pursue that woman and her dog.
Good. Yes. Yes. Good. Okay, Lou, come on. Louie, let's go. Good boy.
I was worried about the camera battery dying, and I wanted to save it in case we found more dogs on the way home, so I switched it off here.
I'm going to reset Louie with the treat scatter here, and then I'm just going to stop recording because I actually am not sure how long it's going to record for, but all we're going to do now is head back home.
However, I briefly want to show you some clips from the next day when we did pursue a lady and her dog. You can see how easily I get Louie's attention with that marker word, but then how quickly he glances back at the dog after his treat. That's how I want early stage reactivity training to look. I would love to hear in the comments if you find these unedited walks helpful so that I know if it's something that you want me to share more of in the future.
Yes. 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 Good.
Louie's guardian had told me that all the people in the neighborhood with dogs try to avoid Louie due to his previous massive reactions. The barking, growling, and lunging scared a lot of people. I'd originally thought that she was joking, but I slowly realized that every dog I saw did try to avoid us by going the opposite way. I was going to need to come up with a new plan for his reactivity training.
Yes. Very nice.
Next week, I'm going to share another tips video for working on leash skills and reactivity, so hit subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Happy training. I'll see you next week.